But I want to go on to David now, and thank you, Teresa, and stay involved. But I want David to come on here from Harrison School District and share with us what they're doing, because obviously it's titled High Flex Plus behind David right now. It's got to be resonant with what I was just talking about, and I'm super excited. Okay, so David, good to see you again.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
Yeah. Super excited. So, okay, so you take over the screen from me. I'm going to stop sharing because I can come back to that stuff about hybrid logistics. So let's hear from you, and you take the screen. I'm going to go on mute and lurk in the background in the meantime. So it's all about you.
All right. So I think you're seeing my screen. Well, let me select the right one for you.
Yeah. Okay, now we see it.
All right.
Yeah, we're good to go. Okay, good.
Take off my calendar there. You don't need to see that. So a little bit about what we're doing. This dovetails perfectly with what Westminster was sharing and Leilani, what you were sharing throughout, the afternoon. We are a high tidal district in Southeast Colorado Springs. So when COVID hit, we went full remote, just like everyone else was doing and trying to figure it out. And like other districts have discovered, there are families who are enjoying this and would like to see it continue. We right now are estimating probably about 5 to 7% of the population are going to choose this option moving forward. So this is something we wanted to provide to our families because it may not be available in other places. So that's kind of where we're at. We haven't launched. We're going to be launching an e-learning school next fall. Currently, any student who wants to be in person 5 days a week can be in person. That just started this week. But we still have some families opting currently for the e-learning hybrid kind of thing we've been doing all year. But moving into next year, we want to go to a more purposeful, specific designated e-learning school. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, so we're on the journey with everybody else. We haven't launched this school. So really, I'm going to share with you kind of our thinking so far, some of the research that we've found and some of the things that we are considering. And again, a lot of it just dovetails perfectly with what others have shared. So we're kind of a case study in the works of our planning. Advance here. So kind of starting with the why. A lot of people talked about the why of what we do and figuring that out. We really found that one size does not fit all. And so one of our goals is to eliminate barriers that are in the system to some of our families who actually have thrived better having the flexibility for when they learn, not having to go to school 6 hours a day, having to travel, having to get kids all over town, but really provided them something personal in their home, met their needs. And actually, we found that parent participation in school meetings increased when it was online, rather than making parents come and try to figure out how to get to the building. Also, then allowing that for kids throughout the day, depending on what's going on in their family. Maybe 7:30 is not the best time to be learning. It might be 9 o'clock. It might be 10 o'clock. It might be 5 o'clock in the evening. So how do we meet that need moving forward? So the big picture of our e-learning school, we have these components. I'm going to go over this quickly because I'll go more into detail on the curriculum planning and instructional side rather than logistics. But I'm going to talk to you about the High Flex Plus model that we're looking at. We are looking at providing learning coaches. These might be family members who we train, or it could be school staff that we train to fill in the gap for students when they can't be or meet with a teacher, and to provide that kind of one-on-one interaction, supervision, monitoring, and support for students in the e-learning school. We're looking at learning pods. So this is a flexible event that can happen throughout the week, depending on the student's playlist and what we're recommending and what they can do. We want to partner with families and how we provide these learning pods. Again, looking at the individualization is certainly key, and that'll be facilitated in part by the teacher, by our LMS system, and by the learning coaches. Flexibility, again, breaking those barriers to the traditional time and space that Leilani talked about. Accessibility, looking at, one of our phrases is building equity through opportunity with access, because we can provide all the opportunities we want, but if we don't also bridge and prepare and help families access those opportunities, we're not really creating the equity that we're looking for. We're looking at also building in some real world experiences that the flexibility of this e-learning school could provide. Community partnerships, looking at outside of the box, kind of that extra partner to do some instruction that doesn't have to be done necessarily through our e-learning school. And then again, a focus on the whole child. How can we can't ignore the social emotional needs, and how can we purposely weave that in? Because right now, that's been done in hybrid as much as we could, but we want that to be an integral part of this e-learning environment. So it's absolutely a standards-based curriculum. We're not, cutting corners. We're not, skipping pieces that from our Colorado State standards. Everything, and part of the goal is that it is an equitable education. It's not a lesser or incomplete education to the in-person option. So that's important to us. So here's the HighFlex Plus. Now, I want to give credit to Brian Beatty, who wrote a book on the HighFlex model that really started in higher ed. So I have some links, and maybe I can make those available to Leilani later, or just Google it. To look at, it kind of started as giving college students the option of, being in person, being off campus or at home, or choosing. We're kind of taking it to the next level with the plus. We don't feel that necessarily having it be quite so random or quite so flexible, though we're still teasing that out. So if you look at this picture here, Leilani, you talked about, the teaching with kids at home and in person. So you can see here in the background, we have this, what we call a polycart. It's a monitor with a camera, speakers, and microphone. So this teacher is actually teaching in person right now, but also through this polycart, she's interacting with students at home through our Teams environment, all happening at the same time. So yes, very challenging. Some teachers, adapted to it very well, but certainly this will be moving forward. Part of what we'll be doing is in offering that flexibility. So if a student can't be in person, they can still join through technology and participate. So the targeted instruction, again, we're looking at one thing that we're going to do. What we mean by target is looking at the standards closely and not just scheduling and giving all options. What we're looking at is doing a deep dive into the standards and determining what modalities are possible or best for those standards and those lessons and those objectives. So we'll be looking at structuring as teachers teach to say to participants and families, this lesson, we really would like you in person, and we want you to come to this learning pod. Or this is a bigger lesson, we want you to come to this learning lab experience, which might have a whole grade level, in one spot at one time. Or it could be, we want you to come where we have small groups going and you participate with a teacher or learning coach because we feel that these standards need that in-person interaction and won't work so well online. versus some might be, hey, this standard could easily be done asynchronous online, the kid on their own time if they want, get it done sometime during the week. So that's kind of the purposeful look that we're using, that's a little bit different than, kind of what we had to throw together. And we're really going to be having to kind of reinvent our curriculum in order to make this happen. So some of the things we're looking at are the national standards for quality online teaching. How can we personalize? We're looking at the universal design for learning. How do we bring kids in and engage them in multiple ways? How do we present it in multiple ways? And then what expression or action can students take in multiple ways? And then also, again, pairing that with the modalities. So that's where, some things work fine online, some things work fine asynchronously, but some things might just need that in-person touch. So that's kind of where we're going on the instruction side. So looking at planning instructions, I adapted these from Brian's work at really looking at, so let's analyze the student learning outcomes. Let's decide what those can be done, how those can be done. Can it be done in person, in a pod, in a lab, online, synchronous, asynchronous, or can it be flex, which means it could be presented in several different ways? And then what modifications might we need to make in order to make these objectives and learning standards possible? And also not just delivery, but assessment. How are we going to assess these? Can we assess them, just with a simple test online, or is it something where we want to bring kids in, especially, when you think about the younger ages and the interactions and the listening and speaking and some of those things, or special populations that might need that greater attention to those modalities. So that's where, some of the front-loading work that we're going to do in order to make this effective. And then coming up with what is the student learning activities. So based on what we find, and breaking it down from standards to objectives, how are we going to present those in the modes for instruction? So the other piece we're looking at, kind of stepping back a little more on the philosophical, is the whole concept of learner variability, and that variability is the rule, not the exception. And that if you haven't looked at this article, it's a great article through Digital Promise on how we've kind of overdone the bell curve with learners, and that there is no average learner. There's composites of learners, there's learning preferences, but there's no average. And if we continue to just kind of teach to the average, we're going to miss a lot of kids in our population. So this is a great article that we're looking at. Again, back to universal design for learning. So often we've tried to, in our environments and in schools, is to fix the learner and make them work in our environment. And we're trying to flip that on its head to say, no, it's not about fixing the learner. It's about fixing our environment to serve the learner, or different kinds of learners. And that's where, we're looking at how do we target and present lessons in such a way that we're not thinking of this generic average student, but that we're thinking of all students throughout our lesson design, and how are we providing access, and I call on-ramps to learning for students, so that we're hitting multiple students with our first instruction, and then not waiting to try to remediate when they don't get the average targeted instruction. So that's part of the philosophical piece we're looking at as we roll out the instructional piece for the online. Again, too, providing as much experiential learning as we can provide, and that comes through the learning pods. We're also looking at learning kits that we'll be sending home. Also having flex time where learners can come in if they choose to, kind of that open office hour or a collaboration group that we can facilitate. We don't have a particular site right now for the e-learning school. So what we're doing is having, in different, where we have classrooms available, we're having these I'm calling them learning hubs, which would be a place for learning pods and labs to come together, but not ignoring this experiential type of learning, that it can't just be this flat surface online, paper, pencil, screen, but really trying to keep that experiential piece in. And that's what you can see here. These are things that we have in our classrooms now for students to interact with technology, and we don't want to give that up. We want all these experiences to happen with our e-learning school as well. So this is kind of the way it looks currently. We have a learning hub, which could be at different sites, and that would be the teacher. The teacher would be presenting from there. It would be school-based in one of our schools. We have the learning coach. Again, that could be someone that we've trained. It could be a family member, or it could be a member of our staff that's there to really make that personal connection with every learner, to help monitor the learning, to help personalize, and help students stay on track. Again, the learning pod is small group instruction or intervention as needed. And again, that will be kind of a flexible model as we get into it to see what's going to work best for our families. And then learning labs is more whole group. It could be a demonstration, it could be a guest speaker, it could be offsite with one of our partners, where students go somewhere and have a learning lab experience. Maybe it's at the zoo or at a park, or at a place of business and industry, so they can have that real experience. And then family connections is going to be critical. And part of this too was just it kind of ties a little bit in, Leilani, to the Learning Council Expo Learning, and that concept of things happening in different places at different times with different groups. And it'll be great when we have the artificial intelligence to match that all together. We even talked about, with our family help desk for technology, it's like, well, what do we do if a family needs help at 10 o'clock? Do we start looking at how can we outsource that to firms on the West Coast that's an hour ahead of us, or on the East Coast where if they want help at 6 o'clock in the morning, how can we think outside the box to provide services for families outside of our tradition? So that would be, kind of that, service on demand, learning on demand. I need an Uber lesson, schedule an Uber lesson for something. So, the technology is there, and I think the people are there. There's a lot of that's happening with online tutoring now and learning on demand. But how can we, practically maybe start to capture some of that technology into our experience? So again, here's a little bit more about the learning coach. It could be, like I said, a family member. It could be someone that we're providing just to keep track of the learner. And this is kind of review, just a little more detail on these things that I've talked about. So a little bit about a playlist. So we're still hammering this out. We're still trying to figure out how this will look. We're going to do our best to form these plans. Again, nothing new. This is out there. Ed Elements has a good article on this. But it's something that we could create in our LMS. It's something that offers that opportunity to individualize playlists for students based on their need. That idea of choice. Here's some things you have to do. Here's some things you could choose to do. Direct and indirect instruction. And again, fitting learning pods, coaches, and learning labs. And that again, where that scheduling piece would be helpful if we had a system that could kind of schedule backwards, rather than me saying this is when I want to do all this, getting feedback on when that learning is being demanded. So this is what it might look like for an elementary school student, where you see the icons. So the little laptop, the kind of that pink color is synchronous online. And then the tan could be asynchronous or with a learning coach. It could be students working together individually. And then the blue would be this is when we think you should come in and participate, in person for this half day or this quarter day, so that you get what we think is the right exposure, the right instruction for certain standards. And again, it could be flexible. It could change each week. It could run into a pattern. That's where we'll be figuring it out. Because we also don't want to tell families if you just can't come in that you can't participate, because even now we have students through our e-learning who moved during e-learning during the fall, but we're still allowing them to participate because we anticipate they're going to come back. So we have students out of state. We actually have some students out of country right now that are still participating in our classrooms in order to get instruction to keep up with the anticipation that they will come back. And then middle school, obviously it's a little more discrete on content areas, although certainly it could be interdisciplinary, maybe a little less demand to be on site, and maybe more a flexible time, so that, the green is kind of like, if you feel like you need to come in that day, we're going to provide that opportunity, but we'll also be broadcasting, and that's where we would be doing that dual presentation. But it also gives us the opportunity to rethink how we're scheduling students. Easily, you could, when you're doing direct instruction online, you can put 2 or 3 classes together and have that master teacher presenting that lesson, while, like Leonie said, others in the background, prompting and providing support for the learners who are participating. And also through recording, that's another way to kind of take advantage of the technology and presenting it. I can't be there at 10 o'clock, but I can log in at 6 o'clock. We can't expect our teachers to come back at 6 o'clock, but you can watch instruction, on your own. And maybe we do have some learning coaches who are working in the evening to provide assistance outside of the traditional school day. And then here on Friday, you can, it's like here's a big, in-person event where we're going to do maybe a guest speaker come in, or some science lab presentations that really, get lost in the translation of going online. Certainly for socialization, maybe we have, some sports or intramurals or a dance, or, the typical middle school experiences that for socialization that we want kids to have. We don't want to surrender all of that in the e-learning school. So just a couple of final things about building a positive, cohesive school culture. Invest in people. We still got to build the relationships, as best we can. There's a lot of strategies on how to do that in a virtual experience. Outreach is going to be huge. That, if students start to fall off, or we see they're not participating, how do we loop them back in? But also outreach to make sure families know they have another option for attendance. Frequent communication, praise and celebration, just these basic things that go on in a school that you can't give up. It's still got to happen. You still got to have those relational experiences going on. Creating a safe, supported, engaging, and ready to learn environment. And that's where we do think that we'll have some form of formal SEL program. We haven't settled on that yet, but looking at how do we build that in, because we think that'll be critical. Again, building relationships, personalized attention, monitoring for success. Somewhere, again, we have this family engagement kits. How do we get the family involved in the education? So we're talking about building kits where it's not, we've talked about building learning kits for students, but also some family engagement kits so that families get involved in those experiences as well. Because I think in the e-learning, as the more we can bring the family in to support the learner, the better off we're going to be. We don't want someone thinking that they can just put a second grader in front of the computer and leave for 2 hours, that the family is going to have to be part of this experience when students are at home. And that's all I got. I kind of went through it fast, but if there's any questions, I really appreciate any feedback or thoughts that you guys have. Like I said, this is our journey. We're kind of a case study for what Leilani was just sharing, and this is our journey.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And I think Mark Schneiderman's on. Mark, you had a comment. Let me find you and make sure you're able to unmute. Where are you, Mark? There you are. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Leilani. Yeah, I just came in really late. Really exciting model. My only comment was just if you're familiar with kind of the School of One model, or I guess it's now Teach to One, was it Joel Rose's work? There might be some references there for you to take a look at the work they've done.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I don't know if David is, but yeah, I'm familiar with that. It's really interesting because this conversation of your model is obviously the biggest thing on every leader's plate since the start of the pandemic. And David, I'm really excited about your work. I think where you're headed is exactly where all of our research for Learning Council has been headed for the last year on hybrid logistics, and the conversations we've been having with the state DOEs, tons of the states, talking about how they're trying to fix this. Because, you look under the hood at your planning tools, and most school districts, you take your academic standards and you make PDFs, spreadsheets, or Google Docs. And then a teacher has to, and then you're driving all of your learning from that point of plotting them on the calendar. Academic standards go here, and you give them a document. They have to look at that. They have to look over at this weird schedule that's like altered in space and time, and then do their lesson. And that work is then duplicated across every single teacher. And as soon as you have a snowstorm or a pandemic rises again, it's all poof. And that manipulation of space and time shift has been hugely discombobulating for teachers. I'm sure you've heard that from your teachers. Yeah. So really what you're looking at is how you're going to keep it interactive, humans in there, but make it highly flexible.
Right. That's our goal, is to provide that flexibility, because we know that time and space has been a barrier to students who maybe just traditionally went to school but had poor attendance for various reasons. And now we're kind of taking some of those barriers away and giving them greater flexibility to be successful and have greater access. I mean, that's our goal, is that access piece.
Yeah, and one of the things I really liked about what you're doing is you're planning to involve parents and extended family. And that has been a gift. That has been a little golden underbelly, not for every student, because their parents were involved, and we've heard that too. But a lot of parents really stepped up and they became adjunct teachers. And that's been a really great thing. It's actually strengthened families nationally. It's been kind of beautiful. And so a concerted plan to use them is smart. I think really smart. They're now more involved and looking over the shoulders of their students. And yeah, it's interesting. So let's talk more about this space and time shift for you for a couple more minutes. And I'm going to go back to my slides and maybe you can weigh in on some of those, because I'm going to show you what it looks like. So just first of all, your model, I think one of the things you said is don't teach to the average. This is the thing that I'm really concerned about from a research perspective, is the little truth no one wants to say is that teachers for the last 150 years have been triaging those kids that weren't involved, that weren't going to make it. And they would spend all their attention on the kids they knew could make it through the next test and sort of triaging out those other ones. So it's those other ones that were really needing to go over here on a remedial route. That was a burden because you couldn't actually put the correct attention on them. But your move to actually cater around every single student may also mean a difference in the discussion about what grade are you in. What are your thoughts on what kind of barriers you're going to run into that are sort of state sanctioned how we do things?
Well, obviously, timing is going to be an issue. How do we get it's an issue now. How do we get all the standards in now is an issue. So certainly prioritizing key standards, the foundational standards that build year to year will be essential. I think too, like you said, that idea of this is, in my elementary experience, you'll get a kid who's, 4 years and 8 months, and then you'll get a 5-year-old who's 5 years and 6 months, but we put them together and start them on the same pace. So that idea of being able to separate that and look at learner readiness and developmental readiness, and that's where, eventually we'd love to see, that on-demand and artificial intelligence putting pieces together as students need it. Because right now, like you said, it's that institutionalized marching everyone at the same pace, regardless of when they entered the system. Because, it can put, children at a disadvantage from the get-go, from day one of kindergarten, in my personal, opinion based on developmental science. But also thinking about in our population, when we have students come in from another country, how do we engage them and start them on a path? We don't know. I mean, they come, you can't lump them all together. There's not an average CLDE, second language learner, multilingual learner either. They're all different. Some have had formal education, maybe better education than they could get here, or they've had gaps, or they've had no education, and they're learning the language all at the same time. So really how we can get to the point where we can leverage systems to be able to help service those students on an individual basis.
Yeah, I love the thinking. It's the implementation that's buggy, right? Okay, cool.
The future of work is changing. Now students are expected to graduate with a foundation in digital literacy and computer science, so they can use technology, create digital artifacts, and design solutions to some of the world's biggest challenges. With Learning.com's award-winning technology curriculum, EasyTech, you and your team of educators ensure that all students are prepared for a career in computer science. Through EasyTech's scaffolded curriculum, you promote digital equity by closing the digital skills gap and giving all students access to authentic learning using technology. The content areas develop students' digital skills like keyboarding and computer fundamentals, build their proficiency in word processing, presentation, spreadsheet, and multimedia tools, and enable them to practice critical thinking and problem solving with computational thinking and design real-world solutions with coding. Across these content areas, students have hands-on and collaborative practice using digital tools and skills that are the foundation to successful technology integration in the classroom. Developed by educators like you, EasyTech has an ISTE seal of alignment and is aligned to national and state-level computer science, digital literacy, and technology standards. Your EasyTech subscription gains you access to its comprehensive curriculum, which features elements like digital lesson plans with an interactive interface that individualize learning based on student performance, hands-on and collaborative projects in which students create original digital artifacts using real software programs, pre- and post-grade level tests designed to measure student growth, and discussion opportunities and other formative check-ins. The program saves teachers time with detailed scope and sequences, pre-built pacing calendars, and digital lesson plans. EasyTech helps your team ensure technology integration in the classroom is student-led, purposeful, and effective with adaptive content and gamified lessons that provide immediate feedback to students. EasyTech is designed for a simple implementation that enables your team to feel comfortable teaching technology even if they don't have prior experience. And with EasyTech's in-depth year-over-year reporting at the individual, classroom, school, and district level, your work is rooted in efficacy.